once we get you voted into speaking, then we'll go for the roll call vote. So be listening for your name. Okay.
Right, okay.
They do not have a microphone, so I may have to cue you. I'm not
That's
sure.
fine.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Three minutes, good?
Let me get my clock out.
3 minutes. But I wasn't going to go until the afternoon because I'm checking in. But what they did, I'm not going to go until it starts at like 1 or something. What do you do? Drag your suitcase with you?
I was upset at that because I've never stayed at home. So I was going to do that.
So, I mean, I'm going to have to pick up this in a little bit.
Yeah. Let's stay focused. Focus.
One thing, Linda, I thought what I would say is prior to the meeting starting is prior to calling order, just as a reminder that the toddler care program proposal is not on the agenda this evening.
Maybe do it under the agenda. Yeah, that's fine.
Or
That's fine.
either
Yeah,
which
that's
way?
fine.
I was thinking about
Yeah,
either which way.
yes.
Okay. They're not on the agenda as an
Still
action
one of your
item.
comments.
Right, it's not on the agenda as an action item.
So when we get to the,
Yeah, I think
when we get to
I can't speak for
time,
the board
do
chair,
you
but
want me to
I think
interrupt
there
you or
would
just
be
let you know that 3 minutes is up?
a
Speakers speak.
Can you?
Sure,
And
absolutely. Just
I
wanna
can
make
do
sure I
that.
don't usurp your
That's
power.
fine, that's fine.
Do you want to state anything about where we are on the YMCA?
Yeah, I'm gonna do that first.
Okay. Because I'm guessing by our different clientele this evening, that's probably
No, but just,
why we got some attendance tonight.
yeah. All right, so we got a lot of, we're gonna be inserting, Mr. Morgan, you still there?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, okay. And I'm gonna have to put him near the microphone.
To vote to
Yes,
have Calvin.
yes, okay. All right.
Do you want me to use my microphone?
No. Oh, well, no,
Maybe I never
I'm
logged
okay.
in.
I'm okay.
If you want to do that, let me know.
I thought I had logged in, and then got logged out.
All right.
Okay.
My bride is coming. Thank you so much. People need to be cash in court too for restitution if they still want to come. I know. We check.
Mr. Dobson? Mr. Dobson? Mr. Dobson? We're starting. Hi, Ms. Zhang. Good evening. Before we get started tonight, I just wanted to make a comment that the WISE proposal for the toddler care program is not on our agenda as an action item. We will, of course, take comment. We'll have 2 public comment periods, but I just wanted to let everybody know, if you hadn't had a chance to review the agenda, that it is not on the agenda tonight. We are awaiting information for further review and due diligence on the topic. So as we call to order the November 19th, 2024 Matthews County School Board regular monthly meeting, I'd like us all to please stand and pledge to allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And in reference to policy BDD, we will be taking a vote to allow a board member to participate remotely from 210 Rockfish Way due to an acute medical condition And again, that's in reference to policy BDD. We will need to take a roll call vote. Ms. Morgan?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Mr. Dobson,
Here.
Ms. Diggs,
Yes.
Ms. Hodges,
Yes.
Dr. Gibbs.
Yes. Now we will proceed with the roll call. Ms. Morgan?
Dobson,
Here.
Mr. Morgan,
Present.
Ms. Diggs,
Here.
Ms. Hodges.
Here.
And Dr. Gibbs.
Present. Item 1.4, we're seeking an approval of the agenda, additions and deletions.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as listed.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 1.5, the consent agenda. Looking for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of October 8th, 2024 joint work session, October 15th, 2024 regular monthly meeting, October 22nd, 2024 fall work session, and October 24th, 2024 school board town hall. Request for school bus and driver from social services, and monthly claims as presented on the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion, all those opposed? Motion passes. I would like to note that we have a schedule for January through June. If we are able to assign any member names to those to attend the board member, to attend claims, to do claims, complete claims, if we are able to commit to those now, that would be wonderful. We have 2 Friday dates, January 17th and February 14th.
I'll do January 17th.
And I will help on 17th.
Okay.
Put me down for May.
All right. In January, then, Mrs. Hodges and Ms. Diggs, you'd like to do that together,
Yes.
right? Mr. Dobson would like to do May 19th. I will take April 14th.
So-
And we'll just go
So-
from there.
So we still need February 14th?
We do need February 14th.
Want to do
Yes, we'll
it? Do it.
You want to, you do the,
we'll do
okay,
Valentine's Day.
the duo of Hodges and Diggs will take February 14th. Then we will just leave it at that for now, Ms. Morgan. Okay.
I sent you a text.
Sorry for the rudeness. I was checking to see if I need to turn on the projector. Oh, we're good. Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
All right, continuing on with item 1.6, with the Matthews County School Board Governance Norms and Protocols, we're continuing on to read the basic norms and protocols that we have. I'll go ahead and read the 2 that we have assigned for this month. How, when, and whom to notify about visiting schools, school sites. School board members should contact the superintendent prior to visiting school sites. And how, when, and whom to notify about volunteering in schools or at school events. All volunteers are run through the school board office as per current policy. And that is an online process, and certainly if you have any questions about that, we are all happy to help you sign up to become a volunteer, but there is a policy for becoming a volunteer in the county and in our schools. Okay. We're moving on to item 2 with questions or comments from our school board student representative, Ms. Zhang.
Hello. Starting off with an update from our Matthews Elementary School. On Wednesday, the 13th, we celebrated World Kindness Day. Janice Town with Read, Rise, and Shine, along with the Friends of the Matthews Memorial Library, gave MES students a book to celebrate kindness. Our first fall showcase was a huge success. The 3rd and 4th grade students had artwork on display, and they presented a play called Swamped. It was a great night. Thanks to Miss Lindberg, we have adopted a cow named Pinky. Pinky lives on a farm, but we are able to get frequent updates on her. We are thankful to the cafeteria ladies for working with our students and making our days delicious and fun. MES had a successful school fundraiser, and we are thankful to everyone who supported us. The items are scheduled to be delivered tomorrow. The 3rd and 4th grade students who are participating in all-in tutoring after school are having a great time, and they are really strengthening their reading and math skills. We still have room for more students to join. Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Bray and Mrs. Clark will visit every classroom to celebrate student achievement and present Quarter 1 class awards. MES has started a new school-wide initiative to improve attendance. Each month, the grade with the highest percentage of students present wins the Be Present Award. The winning grade receives a certificate to display, and they get to keep the Bee mascot for the month. In addition, the grade level winner is announced on the Matthews Elementary School Facebook page. Pre-K won for the month of October. The students are loving this special recognition. The MES Running Club is making great strides, and youth basketball begins this week. That concludes the MES report. Here is an update for THMS. Thomas Hunter Middle School students have been working on many different skills in November. Fifth grade students are working on reading skills in the new Benchmark Advanced curriculum and will begin completing their first opinion essay. Math classes are working on new Virginia Department of Education math standards. They have recently worked on comparing and ordering fractions and decimals. 6th graders have been learning about plot diagrams and how to plot out a short story. Math 6 classes have been learning how to multiply and divide integers, positive and negative whole numbers. U.S. History 2 classes are learning about the westward expansion. They have covered the Transcontinental Railroad, the California Gold Rush, and Native American conflicts during the 1800s. 7th graders are learning about citizenship and reviewing primary and secondary sources. While in their reading classes, they are learning about the author's purpose and nonfiction text structures. Math students are learning mathematical expressions and two-step equations and how to solve them from the new math standards. Science lessons have been hands-on learning with labs and exciting experiments that deal with cell division. The exploratory team at THMS has many activities going on from our band students preparing for the holiday concert to art students participating in the Made in Matthews art contest. THMS is beginning the sale of yearbooks and the process of student council elections. Ms. Gregg is a sponsor and is working to support students. The cookie dough fundraiser is over and parents can pick up the dough on November 21st after school. Friday, November 22nd, THMS will begin those students who made the honor roll for all A's and AB honor roll during lunch times. THMS is pleased to announce that the main hall restrooms are completed and looking wonderful. Thank you to the maintenance team who supported the renovation. If families have questions about what is going on, please see the THMS website and be sure to sign up for the teachers' remind text messages to get information about your students' classes. That concludes the THMS report. And now some updates from Matthews High School. It's a very busy time of year at Matthews High School as the fall sports season ends and winter sports held tryouts last week. There is a huge participation rate for winter sports, with over 30 student athletes on the wrestling team this year. On November 8th, Friday, our music department held its annual dinner and a show fundraiser, and our football team ended their season with a blue and gold inter-squad scrimmage with a combination of JV and varsity players. College recruiters from Virginia Commonwealth University visited our students on November 13th, and a representative from Richard Bland visited yesterday. Last week, our seniors took the ASVAB test as a career exploration tool and are eagerly awaiting the results. We also enjoyed a very big turnout for our beta induction ceremony held last week, which also included the installation of new officers. The first edition of the school newspaper, Anchors Away, was released last week and is available on newsstands throughout the school. On Friday, October 25th, we followed our second activity block schedule of the year, and we really appreciate the members of the Key Club, as well as the volunteers, who worked so hard to make the front of the school beautiful by weeding and mulching out the front garden. We really appreciate the help from all of our volunteers who contribute in so many ways to help our students. And that's the end of the MHS report.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Zhang. Lots of good information in there.
Yes.
On to item 3, student achievement. Dr. Daniel will be presenting first item 3.1, which is the accountability framework, and then 3.2 on VALs.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Again, my apologies for texting during the meeting. We're trying to get some IT things straightened out. I was starting to panic a little bit that the projector wasn't working, so I was overreaching, overstepping a little bit where trust should have been the norm. All right, so I'm going to present to the board and also to the community. For the board, it's going to be their second kind of walkthrough on the Virginia Accountability Framework. This is a new process, a new accountability system that the State Board of Education approved several months ago in concept. Part of what the Department of Education is currently working through are what they refer to as the business rules. So those will be the actual details on how all of this is going to work. A lot of this is still very tentative as the business rules continue to adjust on a day-to-day, week-to-week, sometimes hour-to-hour basis. So a little bit of how the framework is set up. It varies from elementary school to middle school to high school. Historically, what we've been used to in Virginia is looking at pass rates and to some degree growth measures going into how a school's accreditation was based. This model, again, we're going to go from talking about accreditation to accountability. So what under this new framework, it's more than just passing, and the metrics and the indices for each school is going to vary actually quite a bit from grade level to grade level. And I will also mention one part of this. So where it says elementary school, this is based on a traditional K through 5 model, middle school being a traditional 6 through 8 model, high school being a 9 through 12 model. As we've all experienced lately, not every school division is carved up quite that way. So the business rules for our specific school division and how we are partitioning our grade levels by school will vary in the final framework decision. So at the elementary level, 65% is mastery, 25% goes towards growth, and a 10% composition of their indices is going to be readiness. What readiness means at each level is going to vary slightly, as will growth, and then the disappearance of growth altogether at the high school level. So let's take a little bit deeper dive into the elementary. So a key piece to note at the elementary level is that mastery constitutes 65% of the overall score for an elementary school. So what mastery is looking at is student performance on reading SOLs, reading VAP performance, math SOLs, math VAP. science SOLs, science VAP scores. And then also it looks at progress and achievement for our L's students. So that constitutes 10%. A piece to remember or to keep in mind with regards to L students is there is a small sample threshold. So if we don't have a certain number of L's students, that is English learners within our school, that 10% gets redistributed to the other categories. For growth, it looks at expected growth in reading and expected growth in mathematics. That formula looks at how a student performed in a previous year and compares that student's performance to other students across the state with a similar score and how they did on this year's particular test. So it's not whether or not they went from didn't pass to pass, but it looks at, say, a student got 405 on their SOL test. How did other students across the state who also scored a 405 in the previous year do in this current year's assessment? For us, it's going to be incredibly difficult to predict what that growth metric is going to be. So we'll have to wait really for the state to tell us where our growth metric lies. For readiness at the elementary school, the main indicator right now is going to be chronic absenteeism. A 5 C's performance task is coming, but the business rules surrounding that performance task has not been determined, have not been laid out yet. 5 C's, see if I can remember these, citizenship, creative thinking, critical thinking, collaboration, and what's the last one? Communication. So that's kind of a performance task, a project. What we would have talked about in the past is performance-based learning or project-based learning. So it's some type of performance task that is yet to be determined. Another thing to keep in mind as we move from elementary school to middle school and then to high school. So these will be annual metrics that we'll be looking at the elementary school and then again at the middle school. The high school will change a little bit because we'll start talking about a cohort model for the elementary school. And this is a ton of information, so we'll go over this whole framework a couple times as it's getting approved and getting passed. But the more times we talk about it and the more times we go over it, the more hopefully it will begin to sink in and make sense and become somewhat predictable. At the middle school level, you'll note that mastery goes down to 60% from 65 at the elementary school. Again, the same criteria that goes into that mastery component is the same at the middle school. Growth is now 20%, so that bumps up a little bit. And it looks at, I think it goes down a little bit. But again, you're looking at just growth in reading, just growth in math. So there's not growth in other tested areas. And also you'll notice kind of what's missing is social studies. So social studies is not part of the accountability framework. Part of the state's desire in going to this accountability framework is to align with federal accreditation and accountability measures, and social studies is not part of those federal metrics. Readiness at the middle school adds a little bit, so you still have chronic absenteeism, but what appears at the middle school is advanced coursework. What advanced coursework is right now is looking at access to high school credit-bearing math courses in the middle school. Only mathematics right now. There's some debate about adding other coursework into that metric, but right now it is only looking at access and success in high school credit-bearing math courses taken in middle school. And again, that 5C performance piece is yet to be determined. Mr. Dobson?
What type of math class would that be?
The first high school credit-bearing class will be Algebra 1. So we'll be looking at the number of middle school students taking Algebra 1 in middle school. It also, I won't get into all the business rules surrounding it, but basically in a typical 6 through 8, you'd be looking at Algebra 1 and geometry pass rates for middle school students for that readiness, part of that readiness component in middle school. All right, moving on to the high school. So high school, a couple pieces to note. Mastery goes down again to 50%. Again, same components in looking at that. There is not a growth index in high school because of, for various reasons, but basically you start having kind of discrete tests at the high school level. Also, the English component at high school is only 11th grade. So you would have a gap with 9th grade, 10th grade not having an English or a reading SOL test. So again, not every grade level, every content is tested once you get into high school, and those become end of course kind of diploma, verified credit bearing pieces. Readiness becomes very different at the high school level. So again, chronic absenteeism is still a factor. It looks at the 6-year extended graduation rate. So that brings in a couple other factors. So students who take an extended time, maybe go into a summer or maybe take an additional year to get a diploma, to get other kind of certificates of completion and such. The 3E framework is a big component of the high school readiness, and I'll go into the 3E framework on the next slide. Graduation remains a big piece, or becomes a big piece at the high school level. We've been talking about graduation rates for a while, but that's what we're familiar with graduation is a cohort model. So it's the number of students who start 9th grade and then earn their diploma within 4 years. So that cohort piece is important because at the high school, when we look at going back to the mastery, it becomes a cohort measure. So it looks at how students did on their math SOL test during their time in high school. So it's looking at math performance for that group of kids during their 4 years, as opposed to just one singular year of testing. And that's a different that's a bit of a mind shift for how we've been used to looking at math performance. And there, again, going into those business rules, there are lots of details and minutia that surround that, but that's very much a shift in looking at numbers and school accountability over the time. So it's for high school, they're looking at how did the high school do with cohorts of kids as they've moved through the high school, as opposed to slicing just a year of performance. So we'll have more conversations what that will mean for us in the future. Okay, the 3 E's. The 3 E's are employment, enlistment, and enrollment. So that makes up 25% of the high school's overall accountability. So for employment, what this framework is going to look at is this is an and model, whereas before there was a metric called the CCCRI, which looked at kind of a potluck, if you will, as we enter the Thanksgiving season, a potluck of various indicators for what students were involved with during their time in high school. So the 3 E's replaced that CCCRI, and the CCCRI was an or. So did they check a box in this category, or this category, or this category? The 3 E's is an and. So a student can check a box for the employment and enlistment and enrollment. The threshold is relatively high. So for example, for a student to earn a point in the employment category or a full point in the employment category, that student would need to be a CTE completer who earns a state-approved, industry-recognized credential in a high-demand, high-wage field as defined by VOE. So that's a lot of pieces to stack together for a student to earn that full 1 point. A piece that's still being debated is whether or not a work-based learning experience is also going to be added to that stack of pieces for that 1 point category. So it's not just any credential, it has to be in a category that is high demand and high wage. That's not every credential. And we'll talk, the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what this is going to look at, what this is going to mean for the high school. Ms. Hodges, you have a question.
Yes. I want to get back to the math, and what I understood you to say that it's like an average of their SOL tests over the high school years. Did I understand that correctly?
Now, I probably articulated it that way, but that's not how it is. It's a student who, it looks at the first high school credit-bearing SOL test that they take in high school. So for a lot of our students, on grade level students, that's probably going to be Algebra 1. So they have, in theory, all 4 years of high school to pass that Algebra 1 SOL test. Some of our students are going to come in at Algebra 2. Some of our students may be taking their first SOL test at the high school level. Maybe geometry, it may be Algebra 1, it may be Algebra 2. So it's going to look at the first test that a student attempts in high school, and they can take it as many times as they want. According to the current business rules, they could take that Algebra 1 test 4 times if they need to. And if they eventually pass, that will count as a pass for us.
So if you had a student that did take Algebra 1, did not pass that test, then is it thinking we're going to continue to give that test to them, even though they might go into geometry or something, and let's say they passed a geometry one?
Those are some of the questions we're going to have to answer. I think
Okay.
currently we would provide that student multiple attempts at passing that Algebra 1 before saying, okay, we'll go ahead and enroll you in geometry, let's try geometry, the class, and then earning the SOL verified credit to earn that diploma. So we have to kind of think through what's best for the student, and then also, honestly, we'll have to think through the accountability framework. What's best for the student, it's going to win out, but those are some of the pieces we're going to have to look at. And it also becomes, are we stacking our best teachers in the classes based on this accountability framework? So, this is going to have ripple effects in how we do business and what our business rules are going to be to kind of model some of that verbiage. Okay. So back to 3Es. Moving kind of on from employment, or looking at kind of the other criterias or rubric and the number of points associated with kind of stacking different pieces together with that employment. So a student could earn a half a point for being a CTE completer and earning just a regular state-approved industry credential. And that has kind of been kind of our benchmark, is where we've wanted to have students be CTE completers and have that credential. But with this accountability framework, the bar gets raised. And so we're going to have to spend some time thinking about how do we manage and create work-based learning opportunities for our students. Are we offering the classes that align with those high-demand, high-wage credentials? Do we have the people who can teach those classes to align with those credentials to do the things? Enlistment right now is solely tied to ASVAB performance. So if you think to what Ms. Zhang had talked to us earlier about seniors took the ASVAB, this is part of that process, where before students who were interested in going into the military, who were legitimately considering enlisting, those were the students who took the ASVAB, and the ASVAB has a wealth of information that comes from it. But now we gave the ASVAB to all of our seniors. I believe the 11th graders are signed up to take the ASVAB in the spring, and then going forward, we'll have 11th graders annually taking the ASVAB. And it provides a lot of career inventory options for students. So it's a good test for us to give. It just hasn't been a priority for us in Matthews, but it's going to be one coming soon. Mr. Dobson?
You're using that in the part of this makeup, that particular test. All right, and you just had it given to the 10th graders or 9th
Seniors.
graders? Huh?
12th graders.
12th graders. How many students took that test, do you know?
Our senior class is between 65 and 70. So I think there were about 5 kids who weren't able to take it this go around. I think they're slated to take it in the spring. So we gave it to, let's say, 65 students.
So you gave it to 55 students?
65.
65
Yes, sir.
actually took the test.
Yes, sir.
Do you have the results out of that?
No, we don't have the results yet. I think we're anxiously awaiting the results.
Okay,
To quote a great summary from earlier.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is we need that test. I think you would do some good if you gave that test to incoming ninth graders, so you could determine, hey, you did scored very well on this, you might want to look at the junior ROTC program.
So we had some debate about what grade to give the test to. We also collaborated with other school divisions to sort of compare notes as to what they were thinking. Most of the superintendents that I talked with, and as the principals kind of talked around each other, almost everybody's doing the 11th and 12th grade this year and then sticking with 11th grade going forward. I do see the value in giving it to students earlier to help with some career guidance, but we also have academic and career plans in place for students to help guide some of their decision-making with regards to CTE courses.
I look at it being helpful if to deciding if maybe the military is the way they want to go or something.
Well, I think the ASVAB is going to give way more information than just
It
guidance,
will.
military or no.
Okay.
So, and then going into enrollment is going to be, again, another relatively high bar. So to get the full point total for a student, it's going to be earning an associate's degree is the enrollment kind of high bar category at 1.25 points. From there, it goes into looking at the number of dual enrollment credits earned over high school, their performance in those dual enrollment classes or AP, IB types of classes, or being an early college scholar. So it looks at their performance in those classes and also the number of credits and classes that they took during high school. So part of that ripple effect for us is accessing dual enrollment classes for our students. Ms. Hodges?
Is the school counseling office working with the students in a really proactive way to assist them in earning the associate's degree? It's usually, historically, it's been left for like the governor's school students because they're already taking those courses. But I didn't know if there was some work underfoot to really identify other students that might be on that track as well.
So we've begun some planning meetings with the high school as they're looking over their course description guide and tightening up both for CTE sequencing of classes and to offering those classes. Also looking at our pathway to the associate's degree to see what we would need to do for a student who isn't attending the governor's school to possibly be able to earn all of those credits for the associates. It's going to take some creativity to access. Really, our hurdle is going to be dual enrollment math. We've expanded dual enrollment in the social studies this year at the high school, and we have English, but it's going to be looking at science and mathematics, and those teachers are unicorns to try to find and hold on to because of the really high bar for licensure or endorsement from the community college to be able to teach the dual enrollment classes. You basically have to have a master's in the content area and not necessarily a master's in teaching math, but a master's in math in order to teach dual enrollment, or at least a number of credits towards that. So potential impacts. So one of the things we hadn't talked about in the previous slides, part of this framework will have schools will receive one of 4 ratings. It will go from distinguished to on track to off track or needs intensive support. So while the State Board of Education says we're not kind of grading schools, schools will fall into one of 4 buckets. So what we received some tentative scores. So what the state did was using the formula and this metric that as it stood a couple weeks ago, looked at last year's data, and for us, last year's grade configurations, applied it to this formula and gave schools kind of tentative ratings. If this were implemented last year, this is what your schools, where they would have fallen. All of our schools were in the on-track category. So I was pleased for that, not knowing what the formula and knowing we've got some things to work on in order to meet that highest bar in this framework. I was pleased that all of our schools were on track. About, I think, 65% of the schools in the state are in the on track category. So I think there's probably 15 to 20% were in that distinguished range. By and large, those are elementary schools, when I kind of glance through the list. All that information is available on the Department of Education website, so anyone can go in and access the framework, access the tentative numbers as well. So moving down, so the 3E category in the high school, I've touched on some of these things already, but for what this is going to mean for us is looking at our CTE courses, making sure those are tightly aligned to make sure, one of the things we're going to look at is having prerequisite CTE classes. So there's a natural completer sequence that's built in. We then have to kind of couple, or kind of the third piece of that is going to be the credential, and making sure those credentials that we are offering are part of the annually revised high wage, high demand credential. So that's going to be somewhat of a moving target. So not only is it annual, it's also going to be regionally based. So we'll have to look at our economic region year to year to determine if that credential is still high wage and high demand. And so if it's not, then we've got to pivot then with our courses and adjust. So there's going to be a lot of maneuvering with that. And again, these are tentative business rules as they have been explained to us. Every time we go to a meeting, the rules get tweaked a little bit. The piece we've already talked about, ASVAB for the 11th grade. The other piece, the other big hurdle, and again, is how do we expand access for our students to earn associate's degrees in high school? Mr. Dobson?
In our track the other day with the legislators, we were over in the high school, and we have a very good place over there that I believe we're not even utilizing this year. I walked into what I
The
call
audiovisual room?
Right. I mean, we got some beautiful equipment in there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And, and we're not even offering a course this year?
A lot of those dual enrollment and CTE are very instructor driven. So finding the instructor with the skill set and the licensure to line up with state approved courses is very, 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 very challenging. And so the teacher we had at the time was very aligned to that project, invested a lot of time, and that teacher, not to blame him, but that teacher then left.
Well, can't we look for a production type instructor?
We can.
We got the equipment, we might as well use it.
It also comes into budget impacts and, where are we staffing teacher, what our division needs with regards to staffing. So we're looking at that. We're looking at trying to have a business teacher to kind of expand CT offerings at the high school. But yeah, so right now, Mr. Applegate has a club to generate interest to then take classes to do that. Yeah, because one of the other things we look at is course interest in order to offer classes. So it's difficult for me to sign off on a class for 3 or 4 students. Sometimes in the building process and kind of getting momentum, you have to do that. But year after year, if there are only 3 or 4 kids taking a class, we have to look at other course options.
How many children do we need in a class in order to justify it?
I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I kind of look at 9. I hope to get 9, especially in the beginning. Schedule changes will impact how many kids end up being in that class, and there may be conflicts, and some kids will drop based on the first week or so. But what I tend to look at starting out is, do we have 9 kids who are interested in taking that class? For a school division of our small size, 9 is and we may go to 7 or 5 depending on kind of, how the schedule works out. But
do we put feelers out during the years?
Mm-hmm. So the counselors, the counselors do an interest survey. They have conversations. They go in and schedule and talk about courses. Teachers try to sell their classes to for their kids. So if you're an elective teacher, you're constantly hustling, trying to get kids to stay in band and come back to band, or take art, or come take a CTE class.
My other side of that would be, you had talked to other superintendents in nearby districts here, and they weren't looking to get involved with a vocational school per se, where all four of us would go into it. But my other item is to reach out and see if they have enough kids that are interested that we could possibly take several of their kids with several of our kids and achieve the number that you're looking for.
Right.
And then hopefully they would offer something to us that we don't have at their location.
And we're doing a little bit of that currently. So we, for our dual enrollment sociology and psychology, we're partnering with West Point. That's a virtual class. So we piggybacked on their contract with an RCC professor who was offering DE Psych and Soc for West Point. So we bought 2 seats from them for our students to take those classes virtually, kind of like the ROTC program. I think as we look at expanding and improving our CT offerings, and also if we have diverse offerings, we can do some of that horse trading. But the regional program, one of the things we haven't talked about in the past is kind of how that funding model works. And so school divisions are, they're responsible for a certain amount of funding, so they have to pay per seat, and they're assigned a certain number of seats, whether they fill them or not. So if Matthews had participated in a regional program and we were assigned 20 seats, and we were only sending 15 kids, we're still paying for 20. And then to have a second tech program for us is going to pull those kids away. So that's part of the hesitation of other school divisions who are already participating in regional CTE programs. We haven't talked about that specific piece of it,
Right.
But that's part of their hesitation as well, because it's.
Well, I think if you use your head, you're not going to, like us, and Middlesex is about the same size as us, so their numbers would sort of match us in a particular way, but you just don't go overboard.
Right.
I mean, you keep it within reason. I mean, we're still only using 4 seats, I think, over at the ROTC program.
Yeah, I think we have 3 students at ROTC.
3? Okay. So, you know, it's not like we went bonkers on it.
Correct. And I think probably what I would call, I guess, horse trading, or just kind of trading seats back and forth. I think we're going to have initially more success with that rather than looking at kind of trying to start a regional program or initiate a new regional program in the short term. So getting back to some of our impacts. So what we don't know yet is how our unique grade configuration is going to impact a lot of this framework. I requested from the state to give me tentative numbers based on our current grade configuration. They're hoping to get that to me by the end of the calendar year, if not at the beginning of 2025. So that way I can have somewhat of a picture of what that would look like with 8th grade at the high school. Because remember, 8th grade does have growth. Its readiness indicators are slightly different than students in grades 9 through 12. Does their 8th grade first attempt at math count, or do we wait until that first attempt is in the 9th grade? And what are the business rules then for some of these very nuanced measurements? So I've reached out to them to get a tentative, and so I'll share that once I have it. And again, the business rules, and I think I've probably said that a half dozen, if not more times during this longer than expected presentation, but that implementation, those business rules, again, change pretty regularly. So various meetings and kind of checkpoints from the state have been scheduled and canceled. So we're not super sure what that means and where that's going. There are divisions who are pushing back on the timeline on the implementation of the framework. So we'll see with the General Assembly taking session at the beginning of the year, kind of what that means and if there will be any delays in the implementation of this framework. But this is kind of what we know as it stands of today. And we'll kind of keep working and keep informing you all as to how it evolves. Yes, ma'am.
If I your previous slide on enrollment. Outside, currently, do we have students outside of the governor's school who are earning credits towards an associate degree?
So we have students who are earning credits towards an associate's degree. And so there we have a number of dual enrollment classes that are available to students in-house at Matthews High School. Do we have enough of them in-house for them to earn the associate's degree currently? No, we do not. So that right now, because accessing a dual enrollment science class or a dual enrollment math class, the only students who are able to access those currently are students enrolled at the governor's school. So do we need to try to recruit a dual enrollment math teacher to come on campus? Do we fill that void virtually? Do we fill that by partnering with another school division to kind of fill that virtually, or how do we? So we're going to have to get creative in both in math and looking at science. Currently, a lot of our students will take an AP math class, and we're offering AP math classes. But we also will have to look at access to AP science classes, which in my opinion are going to be much more difficult to do virtually because of the lab components with those math classes, with the science classes. They just become more challenging.
In your view, would it be helpful to our students at the high school to have more slots in the governor's school?
Maybe. I mean, we can take a look at that and look at kind of what that impact is and how we can do that.
Thank you.
So currently, we have 14 slots at governor's school across 3 grade levels. Okay. Any other questions on framework?
Yes, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Back to that concept of mastery at the high school, decreasing to the 50% level. Have you been informed of the rationale for that?
No. We've talked a little bit about at the elementary and the middle school level, and usually that debate centers on the mastery versus the growth component and kind of the balance between those two. Most of the debate at the high school level around the framework has been on the readiness component. Because there just aren't as many SOL tests being taken at the high school level. So that weight of 50% of your school's accreditation or your school's accountability is going to come down to a much smaller portion of your students. So you're probably only looking at a quarter to a third of your student population at the high school who are engaged in SOL testing in any one year. And so that may be part of it, but that has not been expressed as part of a rationale. It's me assuming.
Okay. And regarding the high demand, high wage certifications or credentials, you say that keeps changing. So it hasn't been defined for us yet.
Correct.
And we can expect it to change annually.
Correct. By region.
How will we be able to be nimble enough to adjust students' schedules, the track that they're on, to fit?
I don't have the answer to that right now.
Of course, these questions are coming up in your meetings.
Yes.
And so.
Yes, and as of right now, VOE is an entity, a state-level entity that is 4 years old. Somewhere is a relatively new agency, I guess. We have still not seen for the upcoming year what the defined list of credentials is at this time. There's a pretty broad list of high-demand careers, and it's honestly probably about 80% of the careers. But a credential that is then high wage along with high demand, that has yet to be determined. And there are thousands of industry credentials that are available. Every industry is going to churn out a credential for their specific product. every piece of software is going to have a credential that goes along with their software. So it's knowing what's going to be on that list to then align a course, align your curriculum then to be able to pass that test, and then have the instructor who may then need a certification to then administer that credential test, along with knowing the content and knowing the curriculum. It's going to be a very challenging piece, and there's a ton of needed attention towards CTE and career readiness. This is going to be a difficult hurdle and a constantly changing hurdle. And it may end up being simpler than what we anticipate it being. It may be so broad that there's so many things that are high demand and high wage that it's still, it's
Right.
a high hurdle in name only, but we don't know yet because we just haven't seen the credentials at this time.
Right, okay.
And I think to follow up on that thought is, we've talked about these CTE courses that we're offering, but we haven't talked about what students might be interested in. So we may have a variety of courses that are certifications, but what happens when our students want to take them?
Right.
Are we going to say, got to take them anyway because we? it's
That's kind of the
report card we have?
debate and the friction point as we have these initial conversations with the counseling office at the high school is, well, we've got these classes, but they aren't the classes that kids necessarily want to take. And so do you kind of shoehorn some kids in there, or do we offer the classes, the courses that maybe aren't preparing them for a high demand, high wage CTE completer credential and stuff? And a lot of times our students take some of these things and never go into that career, and that may be okay too. So you get into some philosophical debates about, do you put a kid into a class because you're trying to prepare that student for a career that you think fits them, but they may want something else. And another huge piece that's missing here is arts. So there's no social studies in here, but there's also no arts. There's no mention of band or art or any of those kinds of things. So there's a whole nother avenue of success and enrichment for students that is not part of this framework.
In addition, a small school like ours.
Yes.
That even makes it more complicated.
It
But
does.
unfortunately, I doubt that they considered small divisions like ours when they were coming up with this.
And there's a lot of really good that's in this. I mean, I agree with a lot of what's here. It's going to just require, again, more adjustment in our tiny little school division, along with Virginia Literacy Act, new math standards coming, new reading standards coming, science and social studies standards are coming along quickly. So we will have that in the next year as well. So there's just a lot of stuff coming very, very quickly.
Mr. Morgan, do you have any comments, questions for Dr. Daniel?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions on framework? No? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Daniel.
You're welcome. Mr. Anthony, can we go to vowels now, please? All right, as part of our monthly examination of student performance, we've talked about STAR data, which is a universal screening tool that our students in basically grades 1st grade through 8th grade. We have some high school students who do STAR as well, but STAR data is kind of 1st grade through 8th grade. VALS is a new state required assessment tool in language and literacy. It is replacing PALS. So I'm sure you've heard of PALS in previous years. There was a pre-K PALS, but then really PALS was given kind of K through 3. VALS is in that same window. It's a K through 3 assessment tool. So the purpose behind VALS is, and I'm not going to read the whole slide, but really to design, is designed to identify students who may be at risk for developing reading difficulties. One of the pieces that how VALS differs from PALS is that VALS starts at a grade level expectation, and then it's categorizes a student's performance against that grade level expectation. Whereas PALS, you would be exposed to increasingly difficult, more difficult kind of coding pieces or sounds or comprehension to then give you kind of a grade level measurement. So you could be above the benchmark, et cetera. VALs, the categories are aligned differently than PALs. So we'll talk a little bit about what sort of buckets, if you will, student performance looks kind of falls in. And buckets isn't a particularly elegant way to look at it, but 3 category areas for VALs performance. And it's really designed to align with the Virginia Literacy Act and the science of reading. The VALs are administered 1-to-1, so it is a very intensive administration process, very labor intensive. So again, more overview. VALs gives a snapshot of critical literacy skills at a single moment in time. And it's really to look at identifying students at risk for developing reading difficulties. So it's not giving you a reading ability metric. It's more about identifying whether or not a student is at risk for developing reading difficulties. So it's looking at decoding, encoding, and language. It also provides a great deal of diagnostic information. So depending on how a student performs, that diagnostic information may then inform the intervention strategies that will then be in place at the elementary school. Excuse me, so looking at our VALs data. So the Stark number, so in kindergarten, 60% of our kindergarten students fell in the high risk category with regards to their VALs. The good news is, as our students are with us, their performance improves. So looking at and just kind of glancing at that chart, it's obvious that we've got great teachers in front of our kids working to improve their reading performance. But I will also say this is a very new instrument, not just for us, but across the state. It is a new deployment of this assessment. I asked Ms. Bray, how do our VALs data line up with our STAR performance? And they're pretty close. There's an outlier here or there, but by and large, the categories that students are falling in with VALs are pretty close to what our STAR data is also telling us. STAR breaks it into like 4 different category areas, but the numbers line up fairly well. A point of reference for our performance against, I don't have overall state level data. I do have, again, just a reminder, we joined CIP, Comprehensive Instructional Program. So that is a very data-rich collaborative across the state. So if a school division is willing to share their VALs performance with the CIP team, they will kind of aggregate the data for us. So he sent out, the director of CIP sent out some comparison numbers of about 35 of the 70 school divisions in CIP. Looking at that data, most of the categories per grade level is about a third. It's about, looking at statewide, or those 35 school divisions, it's roughly a third in high risk, a third in moderate risk, a third in low risk. I will say at kindergarten, that comparison group skews a little bit more to the low risk category. So they, instead of say 33, 35%, it was about 40%. So it doesn't help the alarm that 60% of our kindergartners at this fall assessment are in the high risk category. Ours, in the CIP data, our kindergarten school was the highest percentage in high risk in the CIP kind of cohort. Our numbers, when we get to 3rd grade, are better than the other schools in that CIP cohort, but there's some reading work to do. I'm trying to think of some other observations, some of the pieces that we talked about. So every student who scored in the high risk has a reading plan that is being developed with our reading specialists. So they are working through the reading plans with students. I'm going to kind of go a little bit. Let me talk about what the risk band percentages, what those bands mean. So there's not a grade level kind of equivalency that goes along with it. It's a relatively vague statement that goes with being in the low risk. So it's just saying they're in a low risk for developing reading difficulties. Skipping down to high risk. So if a student scores in that high risk category on their VALs, the EIRI, as part of the Virginia Literacy Act, mandates that there's an additional 2.5 hours of literacy instruction per week. And again, I'll highlight the additional to that. So the elementary school already has an intervention block built into their schedule during the day. So there's a 30-minute block already in place. So that 30-minute block is where this additional literacy instruction is occurring for the students in that high-risk category. For students in that low-risk category, that's where enrichment activities are taking place with classroom teachers or with other teachers in the building. So that's sort of how we're kind of breaking out small groups, providing intervention pieces. VALs will be given in the fall, the winter, and again in the spring. So the winter assessment is the last 2 weeks in January. Unlike PALs that we've done in the past, the winter screening is pretty similar to the fall. There are a couple components that are not in the winter screening that are in the fall and the spring, but looking at some of the decoding pieces, those remain constant across all three. Some of the comprehension and the overall literacy piece is absent in the winter, but that will reappear again in the spring. So we'll get kind of a mid-year checkpoint to look at, do we have growth? Are we seeing improvement in those percentages? The groups will then be rearranged. So if a student remains in that high risk, they'll remain in that EIRI situation. If they've moved into an upper category, then they will be pulled out of that intervention plan. But our elementary team is on it with regard to intervention strategies and working with students and monitoring data and looking at like our different tiers of intervention to work with kids. Yes, sir.
What are you going to do with the moderate kids?
So that's part of that enrichment period. So you can differentiate some for the enrichment for the kids who are in the low risk and then in the moderate.
Who's going to make that determination?
So each grade level has data meetings, and so they're grouping kids along with the reading specialists, and the administrators are working on a grade level basis to determine who's going where and moving kids around.
And as they progress through the grades, you'll have them identified already so that when they start up again.
And that's part of that MTSS process that we've talked about in years past, and having kind of a data warehouse and looking at student performance year after year. So we'll look at how we group students in homeroom classes from year to year so we can assign supports to various classrooms from year to year. So we know we can then schedule the reading specialists or TAs who we know are going to need to work with certain populations of students. But it's not all the high risk are going to be in one class, but we know where pockets of high risk or moderate risk students are going to be, so we can map out those support resources across the day. Questions on VALs data at this time? It's kind of the hard truth about where we are right now. And I'll be honest, like, it's stark to look at it, but a lot of school divisions are looking at stark numbers. So we're not, the kindergarten piece is an outlier, but our other bands are not atypical from across the state. Not that we're comparing down. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of, to improve, you have to address where your shortfalls are, and so this is where we have a shortfall right now.
Well, to that point, what is your opinion of vowels? And maybe this is better addressed to an educator, as compared to PALS as an assessment tool to be able to target appropriate interventions by student. Is the vowels a superior tool? But, I mean, we've only
think-
had just one interaction with it so far. It may be hard to say.
Yeah, so at the first iteration of the testing, I think it's going to be hard to how much value we put with it. I think the piece that's critical with vowels over PALS is that vowels aligns with the science of reading that is part of the VLA, that is part of our textbook series. So all the pieces then align for that. I think the rigor of the vowels is much higher
Very much.
than any assessment that we've given previously.
Right.
So, like I said, I think I said at the intro, it's grade level based, and
Yeah.
like this is what, according to the science of reading or the vowels, says is what should be a kindergarten level access to decoding, and first grade, second grade, third grade, et cetera. But I think it provides a great deal of data to then inform those
Right.
reading plans, to then address very specifically what that intervention is going to look like, instead of just having like, let's rehash everything all over again. It's very specific and skill-based in those reading plans.
I think that's the ticket. Mr. Morgan, do you have any comments or questions for Dr. Daniel?
No, ma'am, not at this time.
Thank you. Members, any other questions or comments?
Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Right, thank you.
Daniel. Right, we are up to item number 4, citizens' questions, comments, or requests. Item 4.1, comments not pertaining to personnel or student matters. Protocol for public comment period. Matthews County residents and school employees wishing to speak should sign up with their name and address on the sheet provided. Each individual will have one opportunity of 3 minutes to speak. Comment period will end after 90 minutes. All comments should be directed to the school board. Speakers shall not address matters involving students or personnel, as these topics may violate confidentiality and are not appropriate in a public forum. Public comment is the school board's opportunity to listen to the speaker. Since our purpose is to hear from you, the board will not engage in dialogue with the audience or whomever is at the podium. Matters requiring a response will be directed to the superintendent for research and response. The superintendent may report back on such matters at a subsequent business meeting session as appropriate. The school board carefully considers your comments when deciding on matters brought before us. We appreciate your attendance and your input. Our first speaker is Amy Bohannon-Stewart.
Good evening. So I currently work at New Kent Middle School, and but I live here, and I'm a taxpayer here, but I work at New Kent Middle School, and I was just blown away by the Veterans Day assembly and event that they had planned for the students and their guests. Okay, I never envisioned a Veterans Day assembly at a school could be that awesome. They really knocked Veterans Day out of the park. And the kids were better off in school that day than celebrating probably at home. So I sent the school board and Dr. Daniel a presentation that I was asked to give as a first block teacher before the assembly, and linked to the news footage. There were, I believe, 2 news stations there to film it. And then I also sent you a few more details about it. But before the assembly, first block teachers were supposed to share a presentation with the students to make sure they knew this was not a pep rally, which has a very different atmosphere than honoring veterans, okay? And what to do when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, and The band was involved, the chorus was involved. I was so impressed. And I believe I sent you a scanned copy of the program from that day as well. So, and I learned some things that I didn't know. They had a guest speaker that was a veteran that day, and apparently New Kent Middle School is known for this, and it's just built into this awesome thing over the years that the community looks forward to. Of course, local veterans were involved, and students, if they had a parent or a relative or a friend, neighbor that was a veteran, they were encouraged to invite them for a breakfast beforehand, and they were also attending kind of as guests in the honor in the center of that event, and they had front row seats. Okay, all the guests did. The rest of the student body and teachers was in the bleachers all around the gym. So, but I would love for us to do more. I saw Dr. Gibbs later that day, right after I had witnessed that awesome event, and was telling her all about it. And I really hope that, you know, we can do more than we've done in the past for patriotic events like Veterans Day. Okay, so that's what I have to say about Veterans Day. I was hoping I have a few minutes to elaborate on Mastery Connect. Initially, I had a lot of enthusiasm when I heard that we were going to do that because New Kent Middle School did it, and I knew it got them out of the winter and fall growth testing, which is disruptive. But I hadn't really started using it much. I was thrilled at the idea of having a question test bank that I could pull from instead of having to write my own questions and figure out how to do graphics and stuff like that. But I am finding that incredibly difficult to use. It is not user-friendly. So I hope if you are planning on using that you get training with it. We don't have an IT/RT person I have to call him all the time and ask him questions about why did this do this, why did this do that? You know, this test didn't turn out how, it wasn't, you know, and there's items in that test bank that aren't keyed correctly.
Excuse me, Ms.
So,
Mahaney.
yes, was that the timer? I didn't know if that was your phone. But anyway, I'll elaborate more on that, probably send you guys an email about that later. But please get them training if you're going to use that.
Thank you, Ms. Bohannon Stewart. Mr. Tim Doss?
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. I wanted to briefly tonight speak in reference to the YMCA's request for their daycare / program for the 2 and the 3-year-olds. And I wanted to personally thank you for the time and effort that you are all putting into looking into that request. This has brought a lot of discussion throughout the community, both for and against it. My understanding is the request is for space only for 2 classrooms. The YMCA would provide staff, supplies, and funding, and that the program that they are recommending has been very successful for the last 3 years in Lancaster. Some of the concerns that I've heard is, one, any additional cost to the school system, which ultimately would be the county, additional workload for school staff, increased insurance costs, and then some comments in reference to the 2 and the 3-year-olds should be raised at home by their mothers. I understand and respect all of these concerns that they have. I believe that an effective contract or agreement with the YMCA would pretty much solve all of those concerns except for one. In the contract, if you put a 36-month clause requiring the YMCA to notify the school board of the cancellation of the program, that they had to give 36 months notice, then no school board or county board of supervisor is stuck with approving a couple $100,000 program in a month or two. So it gives a 36 window for that. It would also detail the insurance coverage that's required for the program there, and that the YMCA would also be responsible for covering those costs. And it also would outline in detail the responsibilities of both parties, the school system and the YMCA. And it's my understanding, as I said, that the request is for space only. So it would be pretty easy in the contract for the school system's responsibility because it would be just to provide the space. In reference to the 2 and the 3-year-olds being raised by their mothers, I personally think that that's a great thing. But that's my opinion. And this is a voluntary program. If this was proposed to be a mandatory program, I would be adamantly against it. I was actually against this when I first heard about it. And I've done my research and I've looked into it and I've seen the need that this county has for a daycare. There are so many young families that are out there that need a double income, need the mother and the father both to work just to survive. And they can't because the cost of daycare. So I think it would be extremely beneficial to this. Are the concerns valid? I understand and have the same concerns with the concerns that I've listed. But I truly believe that these can all effectively be addressed in a contract. So thank you for looking into it and taking the time and giving me the opportunity tonight, and I hope you have a blessed evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Doss. Our next speaker is Jean Howard.
I wanted to relate real quick why Gloucester High School reached out to me, and I'm hoping I can offer some small solutions to the CTE problem. I'm going to relate that by letting you know what we've been doing the last few years. We've had many high school students out from Gloucester High School and from Matthews High School. We offer, when they come out, we are a self-sustaining, off-grid capable educational homestead. We're self-sustaining on 5 acres. Chickens, ducks, rabbits, pigs. We're an herb farm, and so we grow the herbs as our main crop. But our farm is a lot more than just weeding and taking care of the animals and things like that. We have a store, so we operate the store. We have an online farm with 250 members where we're teaching educational how to grow your food, grow your medicine. We offer programs, so any kids working at the farm learn how to, they help me, we put together programs, we create songs, we're working on puppet shows to offset bullying and things like that. I get kids from 9th grade up, and it's just amazing. And anyway, Gloucester County, I guess some of the kids went back, and Gene Shook, who runs he's the work-based learning coordinator, career and technical education at Gloucester High School, reached out to me. And I guess the kids went back and talked about how much fun they were having, as well as they were learning, because they're building, they're working at the farm, we're creating, we're doing all this stuff, and because they're helping me build chicken coops and paint and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so he reached out to me and some other small businesses in the area and invited us to a luncheon last weekend prepared by their culinary department, and it was amazing. And then we got to tour all the areas, the automotive, the carpentry, the horticultural area. And so anyway, it was very enlightening, and I would love Matthews to jump in on this too. He has asked me to be one of his CTE training places, and so I'm going to be offering entrepreneurship, mentorship. I'm already part of RCC Workforce, which enables 16-year-olds who are interested to apply for this at RCC, and if they have to do a little thing there, and then they would be sent to me, and they would actually pay them to work at the farm. I thought I related that to the guidance counselor, but I haven't heard anything about that yet. RCC came out last spring and spent all day with us and registered us as a good place to do this. So because we offer so much, public speaking, leadership. When kids come out, we break them into teams. We have a big whiteboard. We write everything that needs to be done. Of course, they always fight over who gets to brush the dogs. You know, we got 2 big Great White Pyrenees, but they break up into teams. They always have leadership and make decisions, and it's a good environment, and I'm so glad they're catching up on that. Anyway, let me know how we can help. We do this free, and also their carpentry department sells the items the kids make, and the guy said that Matthews does that too. I had no idea. They had a Star-Spangled Banner Adirondack chair that I purchased and brought home yesterday. So we need to make sure our department's selling stuff too, making some income, huh? Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Howard. Ms. Judy Salatino?
I wanted to talk tonight just to support the preschool and give you some of my feelings about it. One, right there, that slide that's still up, I think that's number 1, that shows that I think there is a deep need for a preschool in this county. I'm a retired preschool teacher. I've taught for 30-plus years in all types of settings. I was from the well-to-do to inner city. At one point, I had my own school. My exposure to children, my own, through teaching and volunteering with small children's events, I have observed that children who had a preschool experience had a better footing when they entered kindergarten. Preschool gets a strong foundation, helps them get a strong foundation for learning throughout their educational experience, from kindergarten all the way through. There is language skills through reading, rhymes, songs, hearing different tones, stimulates curiosity to learn, the exposure to different events, different people, different toys even. Social skills, listening, being flexible, cooperating with others, having the confidence that if they are not successful in that one thing, that they will try again. Emotional intelligence, how to compromise, discipline self, to be independent. Empathy, sharing, listening to others, waiting turn, how do others feel? The pre-literacy, early math concepts. This has been shown to make higher scores in the future. Once a child enters kindergarten, they are put right into math, reading, writing. No time for what preschool can give them. If the funding isn't there in 5 years, which was one of the conflicts I heard at the last meeting, look how many children got the preschool experience who would not have gotten it without taking the chance. There is 5 years to put a plan into action, 5 years to find funding, 5 years to make a preschool an amazing place, 5 years to get the best teachers. The daycare issue should be addressed, but separately. There is a big need in this community to find a loving, healthy, caring environment. Parents would love to stay home with their children, but they don't have that choice all the time. And they don't have extended families here also. This world is changing so fast. We are getting to be a world of people who want instant gratification, want me first, not tolerance of others. Don't you think we have to stand back and reprioritize our thinking, educating our children early in a loving environment, helping them to learn, to help them to deal with others early, help be curious, help them to try again.
Excuse me, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay.
Thank you,
We need to adjust.
Thank you, Ms. Salatino. Our next speaker is Ms. Diane Grice.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Diane Grice. I live at 151 Blue Heron Lane here in Matthews, and I'm here to support the preschool program as well. I am speaking as a representative of the Matthews County Democratic Committee. I'm also a tax-paying citizen of Matthews, and I am an educator. Before retiring, I spent 25 years as an educator in the state of Virginia. I have been a preschool teacher, an elementary school classroom teacher, and a reading teacher. Over the course of my career, I was a good teacher, maybe even became a very good teacher. I was named my school's Teacher of the Year twice in the time that I taught there. But classrooms today are not the same classrooms that when you and I sat at those little desks. They're not the same place. Being a teacher is hard. And even though I was a good teacher, there were many nights that I went home crying because the job was so difficult. We're killing our teachers. So if you look at that statistic, 60% of kindergartners in the fall are at high risk. Now those kindergarten teachers have an enormous job because those kids aren't ready to learn. in some cases. They don't have self-regulation, they don't always have impulse control, they don't always have communication skills, they're still developing time on task, and they still need those 8 essential pre-reading skills. There are 8 specific things that in a preschool they would have been exposed to, which those kids probably have never been exposed to. Being homeschooled is great if you have that choice. Homeschooling your children is wonderful, but there's an awful lot of kids who are at risk, who aren't getting the specific skills that are needed to make them successful, and those kids are making the teachers' jobs even more difficult. I heard Dr. Daniel and Mr. Dobson talk about attracting teachers and wanting to have teachers at the high school level that can meet the needs of our high school students. Well, if those teachers don't have a really robust system in the county for their own children, then how are we going to attract them? How are we going to get the best and the brightest? It's not only about how much we're paying them, it's about where their own children can go to school. We're losing kids out of Matthews County Public Schools. We need to create a relationship between the family, the child, and the school system from the beginning. The last thing I want to say, and I'll try and do it quickly, is that the curriculum that is going to be used at this preschool program, and I'm focusing on it as a preschool program, not as daycare, was developed by UVA, the same people who do all the PALs and VALs. It's connected. That program is actually birth to 18. It's a whole system. It's a whole program. We're only using the small amount, and a robust curriculum is essential to help kids in kindergarten.
Excuse me, your time's up.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Grace. Is there anyone else who would like to approach the podium?
Richard Hicks, North Virginia. Today's word is inconsiderate. The one and only job of the school board, your core mission, as spelled out in the state constitution, is to provide an appropriate education, reading, writing, and arithmetic, to grades 1 through 12. Unlike a private business that is expected to grow and expand, the job of a taxpayer-funded public entity is to adhere to their core mission. Folks that come to the school board with ideas, desires, plans, etc., that are outside of the school board's core area of responsibility are inconsiderate. The YMCA's recent proposal to the school board is a prime example. The school board is not a rental property management company. The school board's job does not include figuring out how to accommodate a private daycare on school property, along with all of the policies, procedures that would be needed to be developed and implemented to accommodate a private entity on school property. These people are inconsiderate because they are taking up your time and citizens' time discussing and asking for something you are not authorized to do. That is not part of your one and only core mission. Likewise, Bleeding Heart school board members that want to discuss and fix societal ills are inconsiderate. Such board members take up board time and citizens' time discussing issues that are not part of your core mission, as spelled out in the state constitution, providing that appropriate education to grades 1 through 12. Let me end with a request to the school board chairman to keep the school board on point and on mission, and not stray into areas that are outside of your core mission. In grade school language, this is referred to as staying on task. And P.S., let me add, wasting taxpayer money maintaining unneeded classroom space for 500 students, along with administrative staffing, principal, assistant, secretaries, etc., for an entire school is also inconsiderate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Is there,
Tom Bowen, 425 Waterview Avenue, Matthews. I'm here to speak on behalf of the preschool program in favor of it. Clearly, there are differences of opinion, but this program is a proven program with a proven track record. I think it would be fascinating to look at those schools, Lancaster's and others that have it, and see what their K reading readiness score is. I would bet you that it shows much less than 60%. We are at 60% high risk, 27.5% moderate risk. That's 87.5% of your students, almost 90%. This program benefits the individual students, and it benefits the school, because the students are better prepared when they get to kindergarten. It causes less time for the teachers to give this intensive instruction. Just take a look in doing your due diligence. I don't know the answer, but I would bet that if you looked at Lancaster and other schools that had this program, you would see a significant difference in their K reading readiness scores. Even if, I don't see where you have anything to lose in that regard. And to me, this does address your core responsibility of educating students. The core responsibility of getting students in the first grade and K grades ready for school. This gives these students a bonus, a benefit that helps students. I think you can see just from COVID the number of problems you've had in the classroom with students who in the first and second grade were home for COVID, and what adjustment they had to make when they got into the classroom. I think you can make the same analogy here, that these students in the pre-K grades would be, as the speakers have said from their experience, would benefit from the classroom instruction, the classroom attitude, and they would be ready to learn, more so than they are now. So I encourage you. Now, there's one other thing. There's some of the reasons I've heard is that they should be home with the mother, and I shouldn't, as a parent, I would never do that. Well, remember, this is a voluntary program that parents are choosing. This is a parental choice program. This isn't compulsory education. So when you make your vote, remember this, as a parent, you can decide not to send your child to this. That's a parental choice. When you're voting as a government entity. You're voting as a school board. And if your vote is to deny parents the right to give this opportunity to their children, you are saying as a government, parents, you don't have this opportunity. And nobody wants the government telling parents what they can and cannot do with their children.
Mr. Bowen, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Bowen. Is there anyone else who'd like to approach the podium?
My name is Stan Grice. I live in Cobbs Creek, new to the area last couple of years. When we moved here, I dove headfirst into the community, trying to learn everything I can about where I'm living and where I plan to live out my years. I happen to live with a subject matter expert in education, but don't hold that against me. I've had my head in this issue for the last couple of weeks about looking at funding for this program and trying to find ways to make it work. There's an enormous talent base in our community, wonderful people that live here. And I think that they have the best interest of our children at the forefront. It's alleged that Ben Franklin said, "Well begun is half done." If we can begin well with our young children, 2 to 4, and do all the things that the other smarter people have talked about, I mean, isn't that a great thing? Isn't that responsible, considerate even? And I really appreciate you taking time to do more due diligence on this issue. And if it isn't sponsored by the school system housed here, at least coordinating with this program would certainly be beneficial to all the students who are getting ready to come for the K through 12 education. So I'm in favor of it. I want to do everything I can to help get this passed in whatever form it takes, and look forward to working with you in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grice. See someone else is approaching.
Hello, I'm Laura Jones. I live in Moon, 720 Blue Water Drive. And I wasn't prepared to speak, wasn't thinking I was going to speak tonight, but I've listened to so much and I've seen that chart. I'm a 20-year and retired now, but preschool teacher. And I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about giving our children, and again, it's a choice. I've never worked in one where it was compulsory. It's a choice. You can choose to be there. Giving them every opportunity to be their best selves. The things they learn in preschool are things that I would argue most people wouldn't even see. It's their speech, how to speak to one another, how to get that early literacy through that, through their singing, through their rhymes, through their being able to enunciate and to blend sounds. Things that I've always said in preschool, they don't know they're learning. They're having fun, but they're learning. They're building their hand strength. They're trying things. I'm going to go to the art too. All throughout high school and middle school, you were talking about that's always a struggle too. But that begins with that creativity at the youngest ages, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s. That's where they're most open to that. And I would ask that you really, really look inside yourselves, because it's the greatest part of my life was teaching children for 20 years. I love my own children, have enjoyed that, but teaching children, I still hear from them because it's such an important part of their development, and I think it would have a lot to do with that 60% number, or even 87% number. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Is there anyone else who'd like to approach the podium?
I'm Penny Pastiva from Hudgens, and I had no plan to get up at all, but I really want to speak to this proposal for preschool or daycare. I think all of these explanations why these people have said it's important are valid, but not for you. It's not part of your responsibility. And that K number up there has nothing to do with it. It's that K number is something you're dealing with internally with children who are required to be there. Children who are going to a preschool or a daycare and are not required to be there, that's not the same thing. And I just think that you're being asked to do something that is a good idea, and I don't understand why the YMCA doesn't hold it in the YMCA building. I mean, I don't know that much about this, but I don't understand. Or some other building. Why it has to be in a school, taking up school space, taking up school resources, is just, I'm at a loss. I don't understand why. So that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Pastiva. Is there anyone else who'd like to approach?
Good evening. My name is Sharon Fry, Port Haywood. I want to discuss the why having a facility used in our facility. My question is, are we a daycare center or are we a public school system? I agree with everything everyone said here about raising our children and needing to educate them, socializing them. This is very important. I too experienced this in my life, and my children are experiencing it in their life, but we did not expect the public school system to provide daycare for our children. If you have a daycare here at our fine facility because we have space, these people come into our school system with a false security thinking they're safe. We cannot provide that. We cannot tell these people that they are safe. That is not our responsibility. It will be the total responsibility of the Y. So my other question is to the school board, that if we have open spaces in our school system, could we let other daycare centers come on in and use our space? They need it. Lighting, heating, come on in. How about a senior daycare center? Lots of seniors out there, people like me, have mothers and fathers that need daycare. Can we provide them one of our rooms for senior daycare? It's just as important. It's just as important. Our job is K through 12, not pre-K. We have no responsibility to these citizens to provide daycare. I agree one is needed in this county. There's an empty building right over here. So all these people who want to have a daycare, come on and do a community donation and buy that building, rent that building. And also on the, I'm looking at the levels of our reading. A couple years ago, we had a program that somebody came in and new instructor was going to help our children with their reading. Those scores are horrible. Anyway, good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fry. Is there anyone else who'd like to approach?
Members of the board, I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, but this preschool issue, it's ironic. So I think it was something like 18 years ago I became principal. At that time it was Lee Jackson. Now it's Matthews Elementary, but we have been talking about expanding preschool in some form at the elementary school level. It keeps coming and going, but for years and years and years. I know that was one of Ms. Hodges' key points of why she's a motivated board member and motivated to do what she does on the board. And I think just hearing, again, I haven't researched this, but if this is true, if it's my understanding that we are just housing a preschool program that is fully funded by the YMCA and we're just providing space, that seems like an amazing opportunity for us to really attack the scores we're looking at on that PowerPoint at a really good deal. I know that Lancaster, years ago when we looked at this, we actually looked at the model that Lancaster was doing. At that time, they had expanded their preschool at younger ages, and we actually listened to the superintendent of Lancaster give a pretty good presentation on that. Since then, it was really hard to sustain and find the teachers to sustain that. So it was my understanding that the YMCA in Lancaster kind of took that over, and because it was a better deal for their school system. So if that is what we're looking at, where the YMCA is providing this service for our students to prepare them for kindergarten, I think that's an amazing opportunity. We shouldn't pass up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grieve.
Edith Turner, Cobbs Creek. Had no intention of speaking either, but preschool
is so important. I look at the Matthews Elementary School Facebook page, and they're showing kids who are doing the 100 math problems, and most of those kids were preschool kids a couple of years ago. A lot of the reading kids that are getting the top scores in reading, and I don't know what percentage of the 60 and 27% up there were the preschool kids, but I can almost promise you that the preschool kids are not in that group. I was in preschool for a long time before I started doing the technology, and even with the technology that I was teaching, and the preschool kids would come in, they were very attentive, they paid attention, they learned, and they were glad to share what they learned. Preschool is so important in so many ways and in so many areas. A lot of the teachers have spoken about how important it had been for the kids to sing and to rhyme. We had kids who came to us for preschool who were from affluent families, who were from the lower income families. They didn't know that. They didn't know which side of the track they came from. They just knew that they were there to learn, and they were happy to learn. I think a preschool program is very important, and I think that we should do all that we can to make sure that it happens for the students here in our county. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Is there anyone else who would like to approach the podium?
Hi, I'm Meredith McDougall. I spoke last time. Meredith McDougall from Hudgens, Virginia. I didn't plan to speak again. I'd rather be doing anything than public speaking, but I wanted to voice support again as a parent and citizen of Matthews County for this program. I think that most people here have pointed out the stats behind you, and I think that's alarming, and I think if you looked at the group that's high risk, you would probably find out that a lot of them didn't have preschool before those years, and if you compared it with the low risk, there might be kids in that group that were in the VPI, that were in Head Start, that are seeing those successes. We need this program. I've talked to countless parents over the last few weeks since the last meeting. I'm sure that you're getting inundated with emails that I've directed them to voice their support as well. I just hope that you read each and every one of them and see that the impact this will have on our rural community. Also, I would like to note that how concerned I am as a citizen watching Mr. Dobson having your eyes closed and fall asleep during this meeting, which he is right now, and I would like that on the public record. Especially when people who are passionate about this program were speaking, and when the one angry mob voice that was with the gentleman before about inconsiderate of others' feelings, I would say that's inconsiderate, and he was smiling happily when that man spoke. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDougall. Is there anyone else who would like to approach the podium? There being none, I thank you all for speaking, and I open the floor up to board comments. At this time, we will take a 5-minute recess. Stretch break.
Never.
Mr. Morgan,
Yes, ma'am.
how are you doing?
Hanging in here. Everything's good.
Okay, we're about to resume, okay? This
Okay,
is Suki Zhang's notes. She forgot to pass them out. All right. We will resume and go ahead back into item 4.2 with school board comments.
You might need a bag.
We're resuming our meeting now. If you're here for the meeting, I'd ask you to take your seat. If you're not staying for the meeting, I would ask that you please exit now. We'll resume with item 4.2, school board comments. Ms. Diggs.
Okay. I have listened tonight again, and I am so glad that I was born and raised here in Matthews and am able to still live here, and have been fortunate enough to go through our schools here. There were only 2 when I was going along, and then come back after I retired and actually sub here. I saw Edith Turner tonight, and she and I were together over here just not too long ago. And I truly have enjoyed the students and the teachers and the administration in this county, and I appreciate them very much. And I did not run for this job, and indeed it is a privilege, but it is a job, and I take it seriously. And I appreciate this community, and this community serves our schools, our parents, and our students. They support our schools, and we have heard so much support tonight for this. We need to support our community back and our children. Thank you.
Ms. Hodges.
Although most people have left, I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to offer their thoughts about, primarily about the preschool program, but not totally. So let me just first speak to Ms. Bohannon Stewart. I do appreciate hearing about the Veterans Program. That's been always near and dear to my heart, like you said, and I agreed with. I think children learn more from being in school when they have programs about veterans and learn about veterans rather than being at home and offering the day off. So thank you for sharing that information. What I heard from, first of all, it's no secret that I support preschool. That's no surprise to anybody. But I continue to come back to the data, and we say we're a data-driven division. And I heard about the kindergarten, but no one was talking about the 3rd grade, where almost half, 48% of those students are in moderate or high risk for reading. They're going to be taking that 3rd grade reading SOL this year. And that's where I really get not frustrated, I get worried about what's going to happen to those 48% of students if the teachers who work incredibly hard to get them ready for the SOL tests can't get them to where they need to be. Because we know everything after 3rd grade is reading. And we know that if they're not reading on grade level, by 3rd grade, there's a higher risk of dropping out, there's a higher risk of entering the criminal justice system, and there's a higher risk that they're not going to be competitively employed. And I'm always thinking beyond graduation. What's this going to do to our community? Because I believe we want people to be contributors to our tax base, contributors to our civic organizations. And if we can't provide them reading on grade level by 3rd grade, we are not doing our job, I believe, as a school board member. And it's clear to me that our teachers are pulling these kids along, working incredibly diligently to try to get them there. Sometimes it seems like it's an impossible job, what we're asking them to do. So I believe with the data that I see and the research I've done over the years, I think the preschool to me is something that we need. The question is, in the schools or not in the schools? I go back to the fact that what I've heard, we want to increase our student body numbers because that helps our taxes and it helps underwrite our school division, and it's less tax money on the localities. And to do that, having it in the schools, I believe, would get them connected with our school, and therefore they would stay with our school division. If they go elsewhere, I believe you're not going to get 100% of those students here in kindergarten. They may go to a private school, they may go homeschooling. So to me, that's why in the schools versus in a different facility. Thank you very much.
As Dr. Gibbs has said so many times in our presence, and I totally agree with her, we are about student achievement. And how do we best do that? You know, I don't have children of my own, but I have a whole lot of extended ones around here in Gloucester and Williamsburg. And I believe that student achievement, if we can get these students reading so they can read the math problems, they can read the social studies, they can read the science and understand the math problem, so many written out, we're going to see these scores improve. And these students are our future here in Matthews, as they are everywhere. Thank you.
Mr. Dobson, do you have any comments? No? Yes? No. Mr. Morgan, do you have any comments?
I do not at this time.
Okay. As I stated at the beginning of the meeting, this item is not an action item at this time, at this business meeting, because we are awaiting information to better inform our decision. Once we have that information, we will review it and ask that it be reviewed by other entities pertaining to our school division. I have no doubt about the desire of every member on this board, and I said this the last month too, and I echo everything you say, everything that's been said. Student achievement, being here for our students. No one does this job. No one runs for this position without a sincere commitment to that. But when posed with a proposal, whatever it is the board's responsibility, the 5 members of the board, to do the due diligence it takes to review every proposal appropriately. So that being said, we are on a hold right now until we have more information. And I am sorry that most of the people have left our room tonight. I do appreciate all of their comments, and I could tell that they were very passionate and their comments were heartfelt, and that's what this community is. It's a heartfelt community, and I heard it tonight. And are there any last-minute comments? Mrs. Hodges.
This is not about preschool, it's about Jean Howard's
Yes, I wanted to
comments.
say that too.
And I appreciated her letting us know that she's working with Gloucester schools in a
Yes.
work-based program. Because I've often thought there are so many businesses here in our county, you know, I've often wondered if we could, if that was something that we could consider using them, of course, if the owner was willing to work with us, for students to get what I call on-the-job training or apprenticeship, if you will, at some of these businesses. So I appreciated her. I had no idea that Gloucester was working with her, and I certainly didn't have any idea that she was working with the community college on that. So that was great information. I'd like to build on that if we could.
Absolutely, and as a matter of fact, I wanted to bring up, and I'm sorry she is not here. She's a Matthews citizen, you know. She's in our backyard. She lives down the street from me, as a matter of fact. The connection with the guidance department she did reach out for that, but I think that we can pursue that and make sure that that connection is really made, because she has a lot to offer. The fact that she's already engaged with Gloucester, you know, it's a good sign. She offers those exact work learning experiences that you were just talking about.
And I don't know the industry certifications, you know, I'm always coming back to that.
But in some
I think
capacity.
we have some expertise in here.
Yes.
A couple pieces to think about. So within work-based learning, there are 13 established work-based learning kind of categories, or I guess job descriptions, if you will, and there are different tiers of those experiences. And there's different criteria that go along with each one of those experiences. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into and managing, and it's, you know, you mentioned apprenticeship. That's kind of the gold standard for those work-based learning experiences that requires a business being a certified apprenticeship provider. One thing in terms of funding and staffing and economies of scale, Gloucester has a person who is dedicated to coordinating work-based learning activities for students. That was a part-time position. I don't know if that's still part-time or if that's full-time. I believe it went from part-time to full-time. I don't want to speak for Gloucester, but that in order to go out and kind of cultivate those partnerships, you have to have somebody who has flexibility to host those breakfasts or lunches, follow up with students in terms of their experiences, in terms of working with the employers to grade their experiences. So it's a very valuable experience and opportunity for students, but with a lot of the accountability framework, raising the bar on things, it comes with an expense. And trying to find the people or the time or the bandwidth to be able to manage, track, and document those pieces. So I'm sure that Ms. Howard has reached out, and I'm sure our counseling office has done some diligence, done some efforts in trying to kind of match kids with opportunities. But they're also managing social emotional learning, but student mental health issues and graduation requirements. And so that's having somebody who can focus on work-based learning would be a critical piece to doing this well. So.
One other thing, Dr. Daniels, we have a 4-H organization, and I don't hear much about them in the school system today. Are they working in the school system today?
I think our 4-H rep comes and does quite a bit at the elementary school. I believe she presented, I want to say last spring, and talked about many of the activities and how she co-plans with a lot of our elementary and middle school teachers. I think often 4-H for folks of our age has a different connotation in kind of what 4-H was, in terms of a lot of the agriculture programs or going to the 4-H conference and things like that. But that's a little different program than what 4-H is offering. But yeah, we have a pretty good partnership with our 4-H rep.
Well, we should get that out, because I don't hear nothing, I don't see nothing in the paper anymore about anything what the 4-H is doing.
Ms. Morris would be happy to fill you in, I'm sure.
I would just say, Mr. Dobson, you and I read the paper for information. This younger generation uses social media to communicate. So it still may be out there that you and I just aren't in that loop because we rely on the Gazette Journal.
Ms. Diggs?
The young lady who is in charge, I forget her name now.
Ms. Morris? Ms. Morris?
Ms. Morris, she reached out to me by phone and text a couple of different times about programs and so forth, and I did not communicate that to you, and I apologize. But she is very active and very interested in promoting 4-H in the schools.
Well, she's reached out to me. I've done things with her.
Okay.
She's utilized the Rorton Club for cooking during the summertime and stuff like that. And that's about the only time I hear about things. I had them out there a couple of years ago. They were shooting bows and arrows out there during the winter time when the kids weren't playing baseball on the fields out there. But I just feel that I just don't see much of what I used to remember as 4-H going on, so I was just curious about that.
Lots of things going on in schools. If there are no more board member comments, we'll move on to item 5.1, the attendance update from Dr. Daniel.
Thank you, Dr. Gibbs. So in the superintendent's informational reports, you have a copy of the October attendance data review. Much like September, it is rather stark. Some of our conversations have been trying to figure out why. I don't know that I can pinpoint an answer to that. Initial thoughts at the September meeting had to do with suspension rates and some behavioral issues. I'd spot checked. Our school social worker provided, we had a meeting. She attended our leadership meeting last week, so she provided some names to go along with numbers. I went back and spot checked some of those students. In many cases, actually in the vast majority of cases, it's not related to suspensions. It's kind of chronic. Some of them are health issues with doctor's notices. Some of them, a lot of the ones that I, again, just spot checking were just kind of pure absences. There's a lot of pattern in terms of siblings. Both siblings or multiple students from the same household being on the list across different schools and different grade levels. So I know our social worker is working diligently on, and our school staff on tracking attendance and sending out attendance letters, developing attendance plans. Our principals have stepped up their programs for incentives and looking at positive reinforcements and ways to celebrate students coming to school. They're looking at programs to not to make school the end-all be-all about happiness, but they're trying to make sure that there are some of the different programs that students aren't the norm, aren't the run-of-the-mill kind of classroom instruction that excites students about coming to school. So they're going into their bag of tricks to get kids to come to school, and so they're working on it. We're working on it. We have not yet found the solution to curb our attendance challenges right now. So we are continuing to look at other best practices and why folks aren't coming, and are there other sort of solutions out there. We have yet to run across it.
I'm just wondering what the thought is about whether the attendance warning letters really make a difference. I know we're required to do that, and we document and we follow that, but is there any conversation or opinion about whether this kind of turns people around, or it doesn't make a difference, significant difference?
I'm not sure that it is making it makes a difference for some. But I think we see even the students who go to court over attendance, they are not universally responsive. That isn't the piece that turns them around. So even, like I said, the cases that end up going to court, those students still end up going back to court, or we have to do like a show cause when they are on, I guess, kind of a probationary sort of status. So it's not universally effective. And the time even and the paperwork and the meetings required to get it to court takes months to get it to that point. So it's alerting, the letters alert families to let them know that they're in jeopardy. So yeah, we'll have to, I guess, revisit and look at kind of what we're doing and strategies.
Ms. Diggs?
Okay, Dr.
Ms. Diggs. Ms. Diggs and then Mr. Dobson.
Uh-huh.
Ms. Diggs. Ms. Diggs may speak.
Excuse me. Dr. Daniels, in your opinion, would you say that it starts early with the children being either on time for class, elementary school, that it carries right on over, or if they are not and the parent is late getting them there or doesn't get them there, that carries over as well?
I would say the vast majority of high school attendance challenges started in elementary school. And so they're known families or known kind of challenges with regards to attendance. That's not universally the case. There are going to be high school students who have gotten their license, who've got the job, who are kind of senioritis, or they're started making money and they're ready to go into the workforce, and so school is no longer the priority. But I would say, just guesstimating, probably 80% of that is early on, starts kindergarten.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Dobson?
Yes, one of the, looking at this, I would expect the high schools to be the main culprit, but in a lot of these I've looked at, it's been the elementary school. I know we have a lot of people who do not have 2 cars. So if the student misses the bus, they're done for the day. Is there a way we could reach out, and I'm not doing this to the high school, I'm doing it to the elementary school, reach out that we could possibly send a van or something out to pick the kids up that do miss the bus?
I think as part of the attendance plans, we can look at any kind of strategy to get kids to school. I'm not opposed to finding a car or somebody who can do a second run to go pick up students who are in an attendance plan or have an attendance action plan. It also becomes a matter of, will the parents then pick up the phone call? Or have the parents already left to go to work and then the student doesn't get on the bus? And then, does that adult know in enough time to make a phone call to the school to then send that car? But we're open to that notion. That's a strategy other divisions have deployed, and we can look at that, and that's definitely a piece that can be factored into the attendance plans. I've done it in other divisions. I've sent the school resource officer, as relationships are built with families, a parent would call and say, hey, so-and-so missed the bus, can you send somebody to come get so-and-so? And so me and the school resource officer would go to the house and pick up the kid. So yeah, I mean, that's doable, but it has to come with a willingness and a relationship with families to get their kids there.
So I'm wondering, I mean, I like that thought, that thinking we're talking about, but did you find that enabled them to be less responsible about getting their child ready for school because they know that someone else will come and pick them up? I'm just wondering.
The couple families,
this is anecdotal.
Yeah, I mean, the couple families who I did that with, I did not see that as a crutch, if you will. I think for the kids, they really didn't want to ride to school. And again, it was either me or the school resource officer who was coming to pick them up. And so that's not a particularly exciting notion for to ride to school in the back of the police car, or to get stuck with the principal in the county car. I don't think that's what a lot of kids would sign up for.
Dr. Daniel, I realized early on that we do not have this data in front of the audience. They cannot see it. We don't have it on the screen, and certainly our audience at home cannot see it. So can you go through, because I think this report this month is significant. I also wanted to know if we have at our fingertips last month's report.
If you scroll down.
Is it last month's?
September's,
I'm sorry.
if you scroll down.
I'm sorry,
yes.
thank you. But if you could just read our number
Sure.
at risk.
So for, again, this is our October attendance data, and so across the top of this table, we have students that have met their 5 parent excuses for the semester. So our attendance policy tracks a parent can excuse 5 days per semester. After you exceed that 5 days and you accumulate a certain number of unexcused absences, then an attendance letter, once you exceed the 5 days, an attendance letter is then sent. After, I believe it's 7 or 8 days, an attendance plan has to be developed. So, and then there's a column for students who are at risk for being chronically absent. So at this point in the school year, that would be students who have missed 5 or more days. And then students who have already exceeded the chronically absent criteria established by the state, and that's at 17 days. So the number of students who have met 5 parent excuses for the semester at the high school is 7. Thomas Hunter is 3. The elementary school is 10. Warning letters that have been mailed from the high school, 47. Thomas Hunter, 6. The elementary school, 22. The number of attendance plans that have been developed at the high school, 13. Thomas Hunter, 1. Matthews Elementary School, 3. The number of students who are at risk for being chronically absent, meaning they have missed 5 or more days at this point in the school year. At the high school, 60. This time last year, that number was 33. At Thomas Hunter, at risk for being chronically absent, 22. The number last year was also 22. At Matthews Elementary School, again, the number of being who have missed 5 or more days, 51 students. At this time, it was 28 last year. So students who have already exceeded the chronically absent mark for the high school is 2. Thomas Hunter is 0. Matthews Elementary School is 1. I think our nurses and our principals will also say we have had a number of illnesses kind of run through the building, but we see illnesses run through schools on a pretty regular basis. So these numbers are, again, elevated for sure over last year.
And my second comment was the fact that absenteeism is going to be such a significant part, in some cases, in certain scenarios, for the accountability framework. And so I think since we instituted the policy on absenteeism, and we had an initial, and I'd say overall last year, a very good year with the response to that policy. Not that the policy was responsible for all of the change, but I think it did help. That we need to, as you said, be creative and kind of, we need to focus on this. There's some things that we're not going to be able to control for, but anything that we can control for, and I don't doubt the efforts of the staff or all of the motivational techniques that are being employed. I'm aware of what's going on at the middle school, especially, to create that environment that the children want to be at school. That's being done, but we need to look this. I'm very concerned about the numbers, especially at the high school and the elementary school at this time.
Oftentimes too, as families move through the process and we get closer to either the attendance plans being developed or getting close to having to take students to court, oftentimes families will then elect to homeschool. So they'll kind of pull their students from the system. So
It's a tight
Yeah,
wire act.
it
I
is.
can see that.
It is.
Yeah. Mr. Morgan, do you have any comments? Mr. Morgan? I'll take that as a no. Okay. Any other comments? We're moving on then to.
All right, then, 5.2, just kind of a recap from the joint legislative tour that took place on November 14th. I think we had a great day, a great morning, nice representation from our Board of Supervisors, our school board members, representation from Mr. McDougall's office, as well as Congressman Whitman's office, to kind of walk through our 3 schools, taking a look at the facilities where we've been able to upgrade, some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of capital improvements and the like. So it was quite positive. I'll add slightly that I attended a breakfast in Fredericksburg this morning as part of Region 3 with some state and congressional representatives, mainly from kind of the Fredericksburg, Stafford, Spotsylvania areas. Many of the same challenges that we're talking about in terms of school construction and facility upgrades. It looks a little different in Stafford and Spotsylvania as they're talking about expanding enrollments and increasing enrollments and overcrowding and needing funds to then build additional schools where we're looking at kind of, aging facilities. But many of the same challenges, lots of conversation about accountability framework and things of the like. But I think we've had 2 consecutive years of really positive legislative tours and building collaboration between the supervisors and the school board and closer relationships with our elected representatives in Richmond and Washington.
Ms. Hodges?
I think Matthews does such an excellent job for many, many years with the school tour, because there is, I think, significant attendance by certainly our local board, but also our representatives to the General Assembly and to DC. And I think many others are probably envious of what we do. They come. I know there was an effort a few years back to do something jointly with the counties, and it never came to fruition. But we don't need to do that here because we have this. It's institutionalized in what we do. So hats off to everybody that had a hand in attending and also putting the program together.
Yeah, and kudos go out to the building principals because they really led the tour and did the upfront planning and kind of picked the spots where we needed to go. So kudos go out to the principals for adding one more thing to their plates. Okay. 5.3, some school employee budget requests. So I've asked the Faculty and Staff Advisory Committee again this year to push out a survey to all of our employees to kind of capture some information on budget requests. That the results of that and their presentation of that will take place on December 17th. That will take place at 4 o'clock here in the Brooks Multipurpose Room, Brooks Auditorium. That will then sort of start a budget work session for us prior to then going into our regularly scheduled monthly meeting. So we'll start really, the legit kickoff to budget planning season is December 17th, where we'll start kind of hashing out some things. Our next regular board meeting is December 17th, again at 6 o'clock. Some other information, 5.5, some other information for the school board. Just to highlight a couple pieces. So I'd really like to thank Richardson's Cafe. So on 2 occasions, Richardson's has shown they're a generous and loving partner to the school board as they've donated meals to some of our work sessions. So just a big thank you to Richardson's for their continued support. I would highlight one of the kind of some of our financial and some of the audit information. So at a previous, I think it was last month's board meeting, touched on some of the audit information. I've followed up with the high school on some of the reports from the auditing information. One of the highlights was regarding ticket taking and admissions from last year at different sporting events. So the high school has already modified their process in terms of different ticket rolls for different price admission costs. So one of the great things the high school does is reduce cost admission for senior citizens. So part of that accounting process was historically everybody would get the same ticket, but that makes it impossible to determine how many reduced costs versus regular cost ticketing. So they've gone to a dual kind of ticket system for that. The school is also, one of the other highlights was receipts and money being turned in timely either by teachers or other staff members. So the high school is going to be working, and the bookkeeper and administration is going to be working to send reminders to teachers. Don't hold money in your class. Turn it in daily. Don't wait till it's all collected. Turn it in daily with the receipts daily. And it's just some of those accounting practices that teachers don't necessarily think about, but bookkeepers and accountants do and lose sleep at night over. So, yes. Also, you have in that information the division literacy plan. It's kind of, we update it. It's basically the things that the state is telling us we have to do anyway. So it's, there's not a ton that's earth-shattering, but it does lay out quite well what we are doing with regards to implementing the Virginia Literacy Act, kind of what's going on with regards to literacy in the elementary schools. So if you have questions too about our response to the VALs, you can see some of the answers in that literacy plan. That goes to the state. Eventually they post, or there's a link to every division's literacy plan. And if you're, really into research and looking at literacy plans, you can go in and look at every other school divisions and compare ours. And I think ours is a well done plan and really well laid out. So kudos go out to Ms. Hundley for taking the lead on a big chunk of that, along with the teachers and administration at the elementary school.
Absolutely.
Trying to think of other kind of, that's probably the highlights from that kind of chunk of information.
Okay. Great. Moving on to item 6, school board informational reports. 6.1, we have a first review of the school board patriotism policy. This is a first reading of the policy. Members can please open, and hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at the draft and see if you have any comments to be made. The promotion of patriotism policy is something that I have wanted to introduce for a long time. I think it's very important that our county, that our school division, as it says in the opening paragraph, that we believe the appreciation of our country is promoted by the ceremonies and observances held in the schools. This goes back to Ms. Amy Bohannon Stewart's comment. It's the belief of the school board that students must be taught good citizenship skills that include respect for our country, our flag, and the sacrifices of our service members and their families. Members, this is for first review. Does anyone have any comments at this time? Mr. Dobson.
This is great. This is something that should have been being done all along, in my opinion. Some of the things I'd like to see also done would be students lowering and raising the flag daily. To send several students out there to raise the flag, put it in the proper position, tie it off. Then come out in the evening, have like a detail, be the same crew one day. And come out, lower the flag, fold the flag in a triangle like it's supposed to, and place it away for the next day. and then have a different crew come out the next day. I think this will teach them a little bit more about the flag and the proper way to display it and everything. And some of the other things is to instruct about the flag, how to present it, how to fly it. Like one thing most people don't know is when you come into ports in other nations, they will dip the flag as they come into the port. The United States does not dip the flag to any country. And that is something very important to know. You also do not, I mean, it's just a lot of things really. It's simple. You fly no flag on top of the American flag. That's the high flag. But I think it teaches, it will teach patriotism to these young people, because today I watch people, and you have college students who are running around with a flag from another country, yelling and screaming. They have no respect for our country or flag as far as I'm concerned. If they're running around with one of these flags and yelling and screaming and burning the American flag, I find it repulsive, but I would like to teach this kind of thing again, because I remember going out and raising and lowering the flag and folding it up in the triangle and putting it away for the evening. I've done that when I went to school, and I think it's something we could reinstitute here.
Yes, Mr. Dobson, to build off of your points, I just want to express that we did have, as we all know, Mr. Joe Adair from the American Legion come and speak to the board members and the administration about flag etiquette. And he was very informative, very valuable, and I have had brief conversations with him regarding student-led flag protocols, and he's perfectly equipped to be able to do that. He has received permission from his higher-ups to be able to engage with Matthews County to help formulate that plan. This is something that maybe we can have under consideration. I would love to do that, of course, at the discretion of the principals and their buildings. They run their buildings, but I love that idea, and I think it's something worth looking into. Mrs. Hodges?
I would agree. I'm not so sure about the afternoon, because I think the flag comes down after the students leave. So, but certainly in the morning, and even at the high school, I was thinking juniors and seniors might not be so interested in doing that. Certainly invite them, but I could see very well where the 8th graders would certainly be engaged, and that might kind of put them, have a role in the school, a privileged role in the school as the youngest grade level. Just a thought.
I like that. That's good.
But again, to your point, we need to get input from the
Absolutely.
the local administrators.
The implementers, yes.
Yes, the implementers.
All right, and we will move now to item 6.2, which is another first review of a policy. This is going to be the school board committee's policy, and if we open that up, it's policy BCE. Previously, we had our policy was specific to ad hoc committees only. This would address the fact that we would have the opportunity to create standing committees. And I'll read the first bit here. There are no standing committees of the Matthews County School Board except at the school board's option. The school board, by majority vote, may create and/or dissolve standing committees as necessary to provide ongoing oversight, engage the board in strategic dialogue, and help facilitate the board's decision-making. And we have talked about this as a board at our work sessions, possibly the idea of having 1 or 2 standing committees, possibly policy and finance, or one or the other. But the first thing that we had to do was revise our policy on school board committees. So again, this is a first read. You see the edit there made with the underlining. So take a look at this, give this some thought. One thing that came to mind was stipulating that we would have 2-member committees, so that obviously we can't have quorum when we are forming committees. But in addition to 2 members being on a committee, and might we also include or entertain the idea of a community stakeholder as a possibility? So that is not stipulated here, but that is something to consider going forward for the sake of the policy. Mrs. Hodges?
I would say, as appropriate, a stakeholder and/or a representative from the school division, depending on what the committee was, what the focus and purpose of it, if they have a task, to undertake.
Mm-hmm. Great idea. Okay. Mr. Morgan, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Item 6.3, we are going to be having another town hall, a school board town hall, February 25th at 6 p.m. in this building at the J. Murray Brooks Auditorium at Thomas Hunter Middle School. So we're getting that information out quickly. And moving on to the next day, item 6.4, we will be having our school board winter work session from 8 to 3 at Chesapeake Bank, the Chesapeake Bank Community Room. So, we are building the agenda for that now, and we're going to have a full day again. So lots to talk about always with schools. Item 6.5, school board conferences and webinars. We show this every month. I just want to bring to the attention that we do have some highlights in red for Mr. Morgan and Mr. Dobson. We have required COIA training due by December of this year. As well, Mr. Dobson, FOIA training is required by December of this year. The blue dates in blue are for next year, so those aren't as concerning, but we do have some rapidly approaching due dates for a couple of our members to acknowledge. Item 6.6, boards and committee reports by school board members and superintendent. We are just needing to set up our schedule, but it looks like our schedule for the Board of Supervisors meetings, we're good for November and December with Mr. Dobson and Mr. Morgan respectively. And it says in 2025 meeting dates scheduled after organizational meeting. So we will not be filling those dates in at this time, Ms. Morgan? Okay, we will not, but they will be coming up in January instead. All right, item 7, action items. Item 7.1, I'm looking for a motion for the adoption of Matthews County Public Schools Strategic Plan 2024 to 2029. We'll do discussion, but do we have a motion first?
I make a motion to adopt the Matthews County Public Schools Strategic Plan 2024 to 2029 as written.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'd like to have some discussion.
I just want to, we finally got to the finish line with this, or maybe I should say the start line in a way.
Right.
It's the end of the first chapter, but there's a lot of work that went into this by lots of people, and I just want to, to acknowledge that it was a huge undertaking in a very short period of time. And I thank them for all the work.
Absolutely, I agree. Any other comments from members on this? I would just like to add, I echo what you say, Mrs. Hodges, what you've said. The effort that went into this by many, many people and the ongoing efforts from Dr. Daniel to work with this, the product that we have was phenomenal. And this is a living, breathing document. This is something that you plan for, and then things change. Accountability framework pops in, and all of a sudden, we have some new things. But I think that we have a good product. We are adopting the substance of the plan tonight. There are details of format, coloring, colorations, a little bit, those kinds of the pretty stuff that's still yet to be done.
Correct. And there may be some proofreading pieces. I'm sure there's some typos here and there. I would also add one point that, so I sent out, pushed out a link to all of the families in Matthews and provided a Google form where they could provide feedback. So we've read that. I will say that there are pieces in the strategic plan that have been highlighted that are missing as highlighted by some of our citizens. So as Dr. Gibbs mentioned, this is a living document. So annually we'll go back and review our progress on these goals, but also look at, are there other pieces then that we need to add into this strategic plan as we're moving through this over the next 5 years. So I think it's a pretty comprehensive and detailed umbrella and sort of what our work needs to be focused on, but that doesn't mean that there can't, other things won't be added in as we go forward, and other things we may have checked off and like, hey, we've got this, we don't need to spend as much time working on some of those other items as we go through this 5-year plan.
Absolutely, great, well said. All right, so we've had a motion, a second, and some discussion. Any more discussion? Mr. Morgan, any discussion? Any comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. We ready to take a vote? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.2, we are looking at approval of the revised school board policies. These were the policies that we had the first read on last month that are the edits from VSBA. I hope all the members have had a chance to look at these 6 policies that have had relatively minor changes. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I'll make the motion. I recommend the recommended action to approve the revised school board policy as written.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Item 7.3, I'm looking for a motion to approve the amended fiscal year 2026 school budget development calendar. We've had some changes to that.
I make a motion to approve the amended calendar as listed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion. Just so that everyone knows, what we did do was we have eliminated the February 4th, 2025 joint work session with the Board of Supervisors and School Board. And what we have made the change that was already discussed earlier for the December 17th budget work session and public employee budget requests, starting that at 4, okay, with the school board meeting then starting at 6. But then the major edit here is the removal of the February 4th joint work session. All right. Any other comments, discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. We are at item number 8, citizens' comments on items discussed during the meeting.
Sharon Fry, Port Haywood. I had a couple questions, and I know you all can't answer them, but it just came to my attention. For the attendance, that you have a large attendance problem, seems to me. I was just curious if the teachers are identifying any problems that the child might be having at home. I'm curious that, if a child misses so many days, maybe the teacher can see, hey, maybe he doesn't have any socks, maybe he doesn't have this, maybe he's not clean, and maybe social issues going at home, and if the teacher could identify it. And I know teachers are very good at that. And also the town hall meeting that y'all are scheduling. I went to the last town hall, we were only given one question. You can have one question, even though there weren't very many people there to ask questions, and I had several. I'm always curious about what's going on. So my question is to you all, and you can't answer it, but I'll just put it out there anyway. If you have a designated amount of time for the town hall and everybody gets one question apiece, if there's some time left over, maybe somebody can come up for a second question. Oh, I'm getting an answer.
I'd like to address, Ms. Fry, your comment about teachers recognizing problems with the child or problems at home. It's been over a year since I was subbing here, but I know from experience that they are keenly aware of it and communicate, because I've asked questions when I was over in physical education at the elementary school. I had a little boy who had no socks, and et cetera, and I am quite sure that goes on day in and day out with certainly the elementary school, and I can imagine others.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fry. Is there anyone else who'd like to approach the podium? Okay. There being none, we're on number 9, school board member reports. Are there any members who would like to speak at this time? Mr. Morgan?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on then to number 10, closed meeting. May I have a motion?
I make a motion to enter into closed meeting in accordance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3711, Print A, Print 1. Discussion or consideration of personnel matters, support staff appointments, support staff transfers, support staff resignations, spring coaching appointments, spring and winter volunteer coaches, and intramural volunteer basketball coaches, and Section 2.2-3711, Print A, Print 2. Discussion or consideration of admission or disciplinary matters concerning students.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. We are in closed session.